Justice through the cross. As a theological student, I remember spending some time writing an essay on the meaning of the cross. Some speak of God dying on the cross and being absent as Christ suffers on the cross. Others speak of redemption, victory, sacrifice, penal substitution, atonement, and I could go on. But what does all that mean? The cross, for me, at its simplest, is a symbol pointing towards Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. At the time Jesus was crucified, it was an instrument of torture. It was a way for the Romans to control law and order in their cities. Some might say it was an instrument of justice, an instrument that corrected the wrongs that had been done by murderers, thieves, or even insurgents. At the time of Jesus' crucifixion, death by crucifixion was commonplace. Jesus would have been one of thousands who were hung on a tree. So what makes the death of Jesus different? Again, at a simple level, the difference is that Jesus was an innocent man, and an injustice took place that led to his death on a cross. An injustice brought about by the religious and political forces who did not want to lose their power. But the death of Christ is not as simple as that. So what is the cross of Christ about? As I have reflected on this Lent talk, I have been forced by Isabelle Hamley to rethink or even expand my reflections on the meaning of the cross in the light of justice. My ruminations led me to look at the many different ways the cross is depicted. You saw some different images at the start of this presentation. And here I have the Coventry Cross. As you know, the Coventry Cross began life from the ruins of the bombed Coventry Cathedral. The original version was made from 3 large medieval nails salvaged from the original Coventry Cathedral. After the building was severely damaged by German bombs on the 14th of November 1940. The Coventry Cross is used as a symbol for peace and reconciliation. These colourful crosses designed by Christians in Latin America and in Kashmir are fair-traded crosses. These crosses speak to me of our responsibility to care for the poor and our responsibility to buy goods that do not exploit people. They remind me that Christianity is a global religion and not just a faith for white middle-class people like myself. The olive tree cross points us to Christians in the Holy Land, where many are persecuted for their faith. The olive tree is a symbol of persistence, hope, and peace, and is the sacred tree of the Holy Land. The wood that is used to make the crosses come from the pruning of the trees to increase the yield of olives for the following years. Or old trees are used that no longer produce olives. 4 crosses pointing towards the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The same cross, and yet in the way that they have been designed and created by people of the 20th and 21st century, they point us towards the justice that Christ came to bring. As I gaze on these crosses, I see and reflect on God's kingdom of justice. A kingdom of justice where all are fed, where all of God's creation is left. A kingdom where people live in peace with one another. I recognize in these crosses not just the present, but the past. As Isabelle Hamley says, we cannot understand God's justice in the cross unless we read it within the framework of the life and ministry of Jesus. So as we read the gospel accounts of Jesus' ministry in the light of the cross, we see that in the Christian tradition, justice and righteousness go hand in hand. Both justice and righteousness are visible signs of God's reign, God's kingdom. Both justice and righteousness are displayed when God is reigning in our lives. Both justice and righteousness reign when we stand in the right relationship with God. In the Christian tradition, the cross of Jesus is the lens through which we see the restoration of the right relationship between God and the people of God. But we need to recognize that the cross of Jesus never stands alone. It stands only as the pivotal point between the reign of God that Jesus both proclaimed and displayed in his ministry alongside his chosen 12 disciples, and the reign of God that his followers continue to proclaim in the life and power of his resurrection from the dead. When we embrace the cross of Jesus and share in Jesus' risen life, we stand committed to walking in his footsteps, committed to proclaiming and effecting justice and righteousness in God's world, committed to proclaiming God's kingdom. Through the lens of the cross of Jesus, we walk with Jesus into the synagogue at Capernaum and see the wounded soul of the possessed set free. In his footsteps, we stand up for the rights of the marginalized and oppressed. Through the lens of the cross of Jesus, we walk with Jesus into Simon Peter's home and see the bedridden rise from her sickness. In his footsteps, we stand up for the rights of the sick and the abused. Through the lens of the cross of Jesus, we open our eyes to see the crowd of 5,000 hungry people on the hillside waiting to be fed. In his footsteps, we stand up for the rights of the poor, the struggling, and the hungry. The theme I have been reflecting on is justice through the shape of the cross. But the cross of Jesus never stands alone. Through the ministry of Jesus, through the cross of Jesus, and through the glorious resurrection of Jesus, we experience what the reign of God looks like. We experience what life is like when the barriers between God and the people of God are broken down. Jesus' life shows us what God's reign, God's kingdom would look like if we lived and followed the way of Christ. But it is also true to say that the whole of Scripture points us to a call for justice, not just for individuals, but for the whole of creation. So as you look at these crosses, where is justice in the shape of the cross for you? Where is the reign of God evident in your church, your life, and in the lives of those around you? What are the barriers that need to be broken down?